percent of change is something that a lot of students find to be very, very difficult. When in reality, I think the difficult part of percent of change is that you have to set up a fraction and then you have to turn it into a percent. And I think really those fraction decimal percent conversions are what trips kids up with percent of change. So let's go ahead and get started. And we'll talk about, how to find the percent of change, the percent increase or the percent decrease in a given word problem. These are almost always word problems. The real simple thing is change over original. I also sometimes say difference over original, which helps because it's just D over O, or do the do. So what you're going to do is you're going to find the change in whatever situation, put it over the original, and then turn that fraction into a percent. So let's just go ahead and get started with some examples. Last year, a basketball player scored an average of 20 points per game. This year, they scored an average of 30 points per game. What is the percent of change in the number of points scored from last year to this year? So again, we're just looking for difference over original. So the difference between 20 and 30 points is pretty obviously 10 points. Now the part that's sometimes difficult for kids is finding this original. The original is what happened first. And sometimes they'll give you the original later in the problem than they give you the new thing. So you just have to remember that the original is whatever came first in time. So last year, 20 points. This year, 30 points. Last year came before this year. So last year, that's our original. So 10 over 20 is our fraction. Now I'm going to go ahead and simplify this fraction. And I get 1 over 2, which is a half. And then in order to turn it into a percent, I do bow tie. So the bottom goes out, the top goes in. 2 goes into 1 0 times. I add a decimal and a 0. 2 goes into 10 5 times. So 0.5, that's not my answer though, because that's still not a percent. Now in order to turn 0.5 into a percent, and I'm just going to put some trailing zeros on there so you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm going to take this decimal, move it over 1, 2 places, get rid of the zeros that I don't need, and the answer is 50%. So they've done 50% better this year than they did last year, at least with points scored. Joy made an 84 on her math test last year and a 70 on her math test this year. What is the percent of change in her scores from last year to this year? And then it wants us to round to the nearest whole percent. So the difference between 70 and 84 is 14. I think most of us can do that in our head. And this was last year, and this was this year. So Joy did 14 points worse on her math test this year than last year. So the original is 84. I'm going to go ahead and simplify that. I know I can simplify it by 2, and I'll get 7 over 42. And it looks like I can simplify that again by 7, and I'll get 1 over 6. So now I'm going to divide this by using bow tie. Bottom goes out, top goes in. 6 doesn't go into 1. I add a decimal and a 0. 6 goes into 10 one time. Minus 6 is 4. 6 goes into 40 6 times. Minus 36 is 4. 6 goes into 40 6 times. Now I've gone 3 places after the decimal, which is all I need to round to the nearest whole percent. Because when I take that number, 0.166, and move that decimal over 2 times, I'm going to have 16.6%, which I round up to 17%. So the answer there is 17%. All right, I'm going to do one more. Last year, only 450 students voted in the school election. This year, only 450 students voted in the school election. Last year, 500 students voted. What was the percent of decrease in votes from last year to this year? So the difference between 450 and 500 is 50. The original this year is not the original. Last year is the original. So the original is this 500. And now I'm going to simplify that. I can divide both of those by 50. And I get 1 over 10. And then I'm going to bow tie that. 10 goes on the outside, 1 goes on the inside. This is going to be pretty easy. 10 goes into 10 one time. Minus 10 is 0. So I take that 0.1. I move that decimal over 2 places. A 0 goes in this hole. This 0 we don't need. So the answer is 10%. Hope that video was helpful. I'm going to go ahead and stop there.